So Brett, tell me, what do you think about this dark character that Aronofsky portrays in Noah? I mean, it's really hard for Christians to identify this, really. The man is mad at point. I mean, he's descending toward madness, like a lot of Aronofsky's characters. But is that realistic, or how should Christians view that?
Yeah, I think that was one of the big problems some Christians had, was this Noah character. He's kind of a psychotic, almost evil at times character, and that doesn't seem familiar to what I know of the Noah story. He was the most righteous man of his generation, right? But I think what we forget in the Noah story is that he wasn't perfect, and that's kind of one of the big points with God's grace, is that he saves us even though we're not perfect. Noah didn't earn his spot on the ark, and that's a major mistake if we think that Noah because he was a great guy, he was righteous, he earned his spot on the ark. God had every right to obliterate even him. All men are sinners, so everyone on earth, God had every right to destroy them, and so it was only by grace that Noah was spared. And there's a Spurgeon quote that I think gets at this.
Tell us, because some people won't understand who Spurgeon is. So tell us, because we're not talking just to evangelicals. Charles
Spurgeon, he's like a classic preacher from the 19th century, British. He said in a famous sermon on Noah back in, I believe, 1863, he says, "There was nothing in Noah that God should make a covenant with him. He was a sinner and proved himself to be so in a most shocking manner within a few days," referring to the drunken Noah episode, which Aronofsky wisely incorporates at the end of the film. Spurgeon goes on to say, "He was one of the best of men, but the best of men are only men at the best, and can have no claim upon the favor of God. He was saved by faith, as the rest of us must be, and we all know that faith is inconsistent with any claim of merit." I think that is a beautiful quote, just about the beauty of grace. Yeah. And it's not something we can earn. It's not anything Noah earned. So I feel like the way that Russell Crowe and Darren Aronofsky portrayed Noah, yes, it was dark. Yes, he had issues. He wasn't perfect, He was trying to follow God's will, and maybe he took it too far, and his anger and his sense of justice, got in the way of him really listening to what God wanted to do. But I think it was beautiful just that the film hammered home. He wasn't perfect, he was flawed just as much as we are, and yet in the end he did come to that place of mercy and recognizing what mercy and grace looks like.
We talk about Noah looking like he's really mean and he's ready to kill his little granddaughters. You got to ask the question, how many little babies did God kill in the flood?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's something you got. It happened.
Yeah, we've got to reckon with that.
So Aronofsky talks about how God doesn't really have an arc in the movie, but some people saw that God may have had an arc in it. Aronofsky says, no, God had it all figured out ahead of time. Noah's the one that has to go through the learning. And God chose Noah because he was righteous. We need to define that before we end this segment, because I think that's interesting. But God was incredibly mean. Think about this. This is incredible. And what we're seeing, and what I really love so much about motion pictures, is that a good filmmaker will use metaphors, visual tropes, things that we see on the screen that relate and communicate what's really going on behind the scenes. And so what I saw in Noah is just like almost madness. And I don't want to say that God's mad. But if you look at the outward effects, God's destroying the world. I mean, is he mad? I mean, that's the question. So we see God's wrath in Noah's meanness. But in the end, God saves humanity and the animals. And in the end, Noah finally understands that. So it's just, it's just really incredible thing that we just don't think about what's going on. And God says he's angry. I mean, he's mad. So do you know where Aronofsky got his concept of righteousness? You know how Aronofsky defines righteousness? I read this in two interviews. Aronofsky gets his definition of righteousness from the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa Theologica. And there, St. Thomas discusses how righteousness is really the balance between justice and mercy. And he says that's what him and Ari Handel, the co-writer, were going for in the whole movie. And you see this incredible justice of God, and you see Noah trying to pull off this justice. And of course, Noah, because we don't always hear God clearly, I think God spoke absolutely clearly to Noah about what was going on. But Noah, like you and me, are dense sometimes, and we need our wives to say, if you do that, I'm going to hate you for the rest of your life, which is what his wife says to him. And so, and he finally comes around, and also God speaks to us through little children. His daughter-in-law, Illah, pulls him around at the end. But I think the most miraculous way, and I know I'm getting a little off the subject here, but I just love some of this stuff so much. I can't help it, so excuse me. But where, some critics said, well, Noah, or God never speaks in the movie. And I thought, oh my goodness, I said, he speaks to Noah just the same way God speaks to me. I've never heard God's Charlton Heston voice. But my wife has told me what God is thinking, and Noah's wife does that. But the most miraculous thing in the movie is a series of miracles. And that is when Illah, his barren daughter-in-law, is healed of her barrenness. And out of this just wonderful joy of one Catholic theologian refers to at the healing of suddenly there's these hormones, these natural God-given hormones that run through her body, and she goes and attacks her husband. And out of both love and a love for procreation, they make love. She gets pregnant. That's a miracle. And then the most miraculous miracle of all, they're twin girls. I mean, if Noah has any doubt, and this is what's so almost tragically humorous about Noah's character, God's yelling, hey, pay attention down there, that God wants to save humanity. Illah's healed, she's pregnant, she has twins. And so I just think, but anyhow, that's where it's this balance, and so balance between justice and mercy. And it's just, to me, it's a wonderful metaphor, and I think Aronofosky did a wonderful thing. And it's Christian mercy. It's not just Jewish.
But one of the things I love about Noah's movie is that he kind of references the whole breadth of Jewish narrative. In the Old Testament, there's the kind of conception of the twins, from a barren womb is, I feel like, a direct reference to Isaac and Rebekah. And, Rebekah was barren and she had twins, and God blessed them.
That's terrific.
And there's other reference, the kind of Moses and the Passover, the scene where they're kind of in the ark and they hear the screaming and the wailing of people dying outside. To me, that brought to mind, the Passover, when God was protecting a remnant, those who were, put the lamb's blood on their doors while outside, they hear the screams of the mothers of the dead firstborn. So I feel like he's deliberately kind of drawing upon the whole breadth of Jewish narrative. The Garden of Eden is referenced multiple times. And even I feel like there's kind of a little bit of a reference to Jesus himself. The character of Shem, to me, looks a lot like Jesus. And there was one shot in particular where I was like, wow, he looks like Jesus. And sure enough, I go and revisit my lineage, the genealogies in the Bible, and Shem is the Jesus comes from the line of Shem. So I feel like Aronofsky is referencing throughout the Bible and kind of uses this film as a microcosm of some of these themes of justice and mercy and God's grace throughout the Bible.
And that's what we learn from the film, isn't it?